2 at 17:42 p.m. On Christmas Eve, I saw my 8-year-old son standing outside in the snow wearing only a sweater and socks, while my husband stood less than 3 feet from the door and did not open it. My name is Laura Bennett. I am 39 years old. And in that moment, I understood that the most dangerous person in the house was not just my sister-in-law. It was also the man choosing to stand still. I heard 3 soft taps on the glass door behind me while I was cutting cake in the kitchen. At first, I thought it was a pine branch hitting the frame. The wind off the lake had been doing that all afternoon. Then the tapping came again. Slower. Weaker. I turned and saw Owen standing on the porch. Snow clung to his hair and formed a thin line across the shoulders of his blue sweater. One hand was on the door handle, the other hugged his own elbow. He was not wearing a coat. Inside, Christmas music was still playing. The tree lights were still blinking. Someone laughed in the living room. The smell of cinnamon and roast chicken still hung warm in the air. Megan stood 2 steps from the door, holding a white tablecloth with a brown cocoa stain in the middle. She was not looking at Owen. She was only looking at the stain. "He needs a few minutes out there," Megan said, "to learn to respect other people's things." Daniel stood near the Christmas tree, about 3 steps from the door. He did not move forward. He did not reach for the door. He did not tell his sister that she had just locked his son outside in the snow. I ran to the keypad beside the door and entered the 4 digits I had used for years. The light flashed red. I entered them again, more slowly, pressing each key one at a time. The light flashed red again. Through the glass, Owen watched my hand and waited for the lock to click open. "Who changed the code?" I asked. Megan folded the tablecloth in half. "I did. The person who lives here needs to know who can come and go." I turned to Daniel. He looked away from me. That one movement was enough to tell me he had known the door code had been changed. I reached into the pocket of the coat hanging over the chair and pulled out the mechanical key. I put it into the lock below the handle, turned it hard, and pulled the door open. Cold air rushed into the kitchen. I pulled Owen inside and wrapped my coat around his shoulders. His hair was wet. His hands were stiff with cold. I pressed my palm to his cheek, then placed it on his chest to count his breaths. "I already said I was sorry," Owen said very quietly. "I said I was sorry right away." I looked up at Daniel. "Megan was just angry," he said. "Owen was only outside for a little while." A little while. That was what my husband called the time his son stood in the snow while he stayed inside a warm room. I held Owen close and looked at Megan. "You just locked the wrong child out of the wrong house." Megan gave a short laugh. "I live here," she said. "I have the right to make the rules." I did not argue. I took Owen's coat, my purse, and his train set, and I drove him away from the lake house that same night. Before January was over, Megan would no longer be living in that house. The listing she used to make money from my property would disappear too. But that night, I still did not know how many strangers she had given permission to enter my home. The next morning, I opened the door lock history. There were 31 access codes I had never created. Before I tell you who those 31 door codes belong to, tell me in the comments where you are watching this story from. And if you have ever let a relative cross your boundaries just to keep the peace, stay with me. Because Christmas Eve was not when the problem began. It was only when I could no longer keep ignoring it. The mechanical key sat on the passenger seat for the entire 50-minute drive back to Madison. Owen slept in the back seat, still wrapped in my coat. Daniel sat silently beside me. I kept both hands on the wheel and watched the black road run between 2 banks of snow, thinking about one very simple question I had never asked directly in 18 months. When had I started needing a backup key to enter my own house? My name is Laura Bennett, 39 years old. I work as a property claims adjuster for an insurance company in Madison. My job is to walk into houses that have just been damaged and determine what actually happened. I take pictures before moving anything. I record the time. I compare invoices with dates. When someone tells me a water stain appeared last week, I do not argue. I open the file and look for the date. At work, I trust documentation. In my family, I trusted promises. I had been married to Daniel for 11 years. He managed logistics for a medical equipment distribution company, lived by schedules, hated conflict, and had his own special way of ending every disagreement. He waited for it to cool down on its own. We had Owen, 8 years old, quiet and observant. The lake house belonged to my grandmother. Evelyn Harper lived there for more than 30 years. She left the house to me in her will before I got married. No mortgage, one name on the deed. I paid the property taxes and insurance twice a year, as regularly as a habit. I learned to swim off the dock behind that house. On stormy summer nights, Grandma spread blankets on the sofa by the window so I could sleep there and listen to rain strike the lake. She always kept a spare key in a wooden box on the mantel, and she used to tell me something I thought was only about keys. A good house is one where any child who walks up to it knows for certain they will be let inside. After she died, I did not sell the house. I did not rent it out either. My family went up there a few weekends each year, and for the rest of the time it sat quietly by the lake with a thin layer of dust on the tables. 18 months earlier, Megan separated from her husband. Megan was Daniel's older sister, 2 years older than him. The night she moved out of her former home, Daniel sat at my kitchen table, turning his coffee cup in his hands for a long time before he spoke. "She only needs 3 months," he said. "Just long enough to find a new apartment. The house up there is sitting empty anyway." I agreed. I still remember how quickly I agreed. I set a few simple conditions. No rent. Megan would pay for internet and her personal supplies. No major changes to the house. She would move out after 3 months. We did not draw up a lease. I only sent an email, and Megan replied with 2 words, "Thank you." In that email, I clearly wrote 3 months. 3 months passed. Megan said she was waiting for the property settlement from her divorce. Daniel asked for another 3 months. By June, the reason was that no one moved in the middle of summer. By August, it was better to wait until Owen had started school. By November, it was better to get through the holidays, because looking for an apartment in Wisconsin in December was practically self-punishment. Every time, I looked at Daniel and saw him waiting for me to nod. Every time, I nodded. I did not want to be the person who pushed a newly separated woman out of a house in the middle of winter. I told myself the house was still there, still intact, and that this concession was the cheapest way to keep peace in the family. I made a living reading records. But for 18 straight months, I checked nothing. By the 18th month, Megan no longer said Laura's house. She had started calling it my house. The first thing I noticed was a rectangular empty space on the wooden mantel. It was an afternoon in October, about 4 months after Megan moved in. The wood there was darker than the area around it because a picture frame had protected it from the sun for years. The picture showed my grandmother standing on the dock, holding a straw hat. "The frame was so old," Megan called from the kitchen. "I put it in storage to keep it safe. The glass was cracked. Someone could cut their hand." I opened my mouth to say I had looked at that crack for 20 years. Then I glanced at Owen taking off his shoes by the door, and I said thank you. After that, things disappeared in ways that gave no one enough time to object. Grandma's floral curtains were replaced with rough gray fabric panels. The wool blanket she had knitted was folded and sealed in a vacuum bag. The little cabinet in the hallway vanished from its place, and I found it standing against a wall in the storage room with its front turned inward. Owen's old toys were gathered into a lidded plastic bin. The wooden box that held the spare key was gone from the mantel too. I found it in the cabinet beneath the sink beside several rolls of tape. In their place were new tablecloths, matching glasses, and beige throw pillows. At work, when I entered a house where something had been moved, the first thing I did was take pictures and record the date. Here, I took no pictures at all. I only stood in my grandmother's living room and tried to remember where the little cabinet used to be. "The house needed to look a little cleaner and more grown-up," Megan said when I asked about the glasses. On the drive home that day, I told Daniel. He kept his eyes straight ahead as he drove. "She just lost an entire house, Laura. Let her feel like she has control over something." At the end of July, I went up to the lake without warning, only to pick up several boxes of Christmas decorations from storage. 2 strangers were sitting on the dock, a man and a woman, their legs dangling over the water, an open cooler between them. They both looked at me as if I were the one who had gone to the wrong place. Megan came onto the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. "Friends of mine came up from Milwaukee. They're leaving this afternoon." I took the boxes and left. That night, I told Daniel. He said his sister needed friends, and I needed to stop paying so much attention. In August, the electric bill for the house was nearly 50% higher than it had been during the same period the previous year. I took a picture and sent it to Daniel. "The water heater is old," he texted back, "and everyone runs the air conditioner this time of year." I read his response twice and put my phone away. I already had an explanation waiting for me, and I chose to believe it because believing was faster than asking another question. Owen asked before I did. One night in September, as I turned off the light in his room, he lay facing the wall. "How can Aunt Megan move Great-Grandma Evelyn's things?" "She's only staying there temporarily, honey." Owen was quiet for a moment. "If it's temporary, why does she get to decide everything?" I sat on the edge of his bed longer than I needed to. I did not have an answer short enough for an 8-year-old, and I did not have one honest enough for myself. After that summer, Megan started correcting the way Owen used the house. No running in the hallway because of the hardwood floors. No toys on the sofa because the fabric was light. No using Grandma's chipped ceramic mug because it did not match the new glasses. Once, Owen carried that chipped mug from the kitchen toward the porch. Megan intercepted him halfway, placed it on a high shelf, and handed him a new drinking glass. "That one is only for display, Owen," she said. He looked at me. I nodded, and he took the new glass. Each thing by itself was small, so small that if I reacted, I would be the one ruining the afternoon. So, I did not react. I let my son learn to walk quietly through the house my grandmother had built for children to run in. 4 months before Christmas, Megan changed the door code. The first person she told was not the owner. It was my husband. Megan called one evening in early December while I was washing dishes. Daniel put her on speaker and set the phone on the counter between us. "Let's have Christmas up here this year," she said. "There's snow, a fireplace, and plenty of room. Why cram everyone in down there?" I dried my hands on a towel and did not answer right away. Owen was sitting at the dining table coloring, and his head snapped up. "Mom, can I bring my train set? I want to run it around the Christmas tree." That wooden train set was a gift Great-Grandma Evelyn had given Owen. All 8 cars were still there, along with one bent section of track. "This may be her last Christmas there," Daniel said quietly after the call ended. "Let her host it once." I agreed. I still remember why. Not because I wanted to, but because saying no would take more words. On the afternoon of the 24th, we arrived just before 5. It was already dark, and snow lay thick across the driveway. I entered the door code. The light flashed red. The door opened from the inside before I could try again. "The lock battery was replaced last week," Megan said, blocking the doorway for a beat before stepping back. "The code must be glitching. I'll look at it tomorrow." I stepped inside and did not ask anything else. Later, when I retraced every detail of that night, this was the moment where I always paused the longest. Inside, the house had almost no trace of my grandmother left. The Christmas tree had been moved to the opposite corner, where Grandma's armchair used to sit. The mantel was bare, without a single photograph. A white cloth covered the dining table, pressed so flat that the crease lines were visible. Every place setting had a handwritten name card. Megan stood at the head of the table, adjusting a fork. "No drinks in the living room for children," she said, looking at Owen. The sofa was just reupholstered. Owen held the train box against his chest. "Aunt Megan, can I put this around the Christmas tree?" Megan looked at the box for a moment. "Fine. But don't drag it across the floor. Hardwood scratches easily." Owen knelt on the rug and assembled the track for half an hour. He set down every section with both hands, lifting instead of sliding, exactly as he had been told. When the loop closed around the base of the tree, he sat back to look at it, then searched for my face in the kitchen. I gave him a thumbs up. Dinner began normally. Owen told us his class had built models of the solar system, and that his Saturn had lost its rings. Daniel laughed louder than the story required, the way he always did when he wanted to keep the table from going quiet. I sat there counting. In 40 minutes, Megan adjusted Daniel's glass twice. She refolded Owen's napkin after he spread it across his lap. She got up to turn down the music, sat down, then got up again to lower it one more notch. After dinner, Owen asked for a cup of cocoa. Megan poured it from the pot on the stove, set it on the dining table instead of the coffee table, and reminded him about the living room again. I went into the kitchen to take the apple pie out of the oven. I heard Owen pull out his chair, the spoon touch the side of the mug, and the bag of marshmallows open. Then I heard a very soft, "Oops." When I turned, the mug was lying on its side. Cocoa had spread into a brown stain the size of a hand across the white tablecloth. A few drops had splashed onto the back of Owen's hand. He dropped the marshmallow bag and reached for the paper towels. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up right now." I walked over, took his hand, and turned it over. His skin was not red. The cocoa was only warm. Megan did not ask whether he had been burned. She did not look at his hand. She stared at the tablecloth, one hand on the edge of the table, and 3 seconds passed in silence. "He's so spoiled he never learns to respect other people's things," she said. "Megan, it was an accident," Daniel said. He stayed seated, he did not stand up. Megan walked around the head of the table toward Owen. She grabbed his arm. "You need a few minutes outside to remember this is not your playground." Owen did not pull away. That is the detail I never forgot. He let Megan drag him around the chair, past the Christmas tree, and past the train tracks still spread across the rug. He only turned his head to find me, while I stood in the kitchen with the hot pie tray still in both hands. "I don't have my coat," Owen said. "Only for a few minutes." Megan pushed open the glass door, put him out on the porch, and closed it. I heard the electronic lock engage. I set the pie tray on the stove and walked into the living room. Daniel stood beside the tree, still holding his glass. "Megan, come on," he said. She did not turn around. "He needs to understand consequences." Daniel looked at me. He saw me moving toward the door, and what he did was not move with me. "Laura," he said quietly, "don't turn this into a battle." Outside on the porch, there was a soft tapping against the glass. 3 taps, then 3 more. I could see snow beginning to cling to the shoulders of Owen's sweater. I ran to the keypad and entered the code. Red light. I entered it again, pressing each key one by one, and I could hear my own breathing pounding in my ears. Red again. "Who changed the code?" I asked. "I did." Megan was still holding the stained tablecloth. "I've lived here for over a year. I need to know who comes and goes." I held out my hand. "Open the door for my son." 2 minutes, Megan said. "Then I'll open it. Now." She did not move. She stood between me and the door to my own house, clutching the tablecloth, waiting for me to lower my voice first. I turned to Daniel. He looked down at the floor. That was the answer. Before he said a word, I knew he was not surprised. I took the mechanical key from my coat pocket, opened the door, and pulled Owen inside. Owen was shaking. Not the kind of shaking that came from severe cold, but small, broken tremors from a child trying not to cry in front of adults. I wrapped my coat around him, rubbed his hands between mine, checked his face, checked his ears, placed my hand on his chest, and counted his breaths for 10 seconds. "I already said I was sorry," he said. "I said it right away. I know, you did nothing wrong. Spilling a cup of cocoa is an accident, and no one is allowed to lock you outside because of it." Behind me, Megan let out a long breath. "You're overreacting, Laura. He was out there for 2 minutes. Nothing happened. Children have to learn to respect other people's homes." I stood up. "Whose home is other people's home?" Megan folded the tablecloth, placed it over the back of a chair, and looked directly at me for the first time that entire evening. "I live here. I take care of this place. I have the right to make the rules. You just locked the wrong child out of the wrong house." Daniel stepped forward, put a hand on my elbow, and tried to pull me toward the hallway. "Let's go outside and talk." I pulled my arm away, but I said nothing else because Owen was standing right there, and I did not want the thing he remembered about that Christmas Eve to be the sound of his mother screaming. I went to gather our things. Owen's coat from the hook. The wooden train set, which I took apart and packed into the box one section at a time while everyone in the room watched. His spare inhaler from the kitchen drawer. My purse from the chair. "If you leave now," Megan said, "call before you come up next time." I paused for 3 seconds at the door. The Christmas tree still blinked in the wrong corner. The mantel was still bare. Then I led my son out to the car. On the walkway, Owen tugged my hand. "We're not sleeping here, Mom?" "No. Tonight we're going home." He nodded and asked nothing else. I only understood later how relieved he had been. Daniel followed us outside while I buckled Owen into his seat. Snow fell straight and light through the glow of the driveway lamp. "She just got divorced, Laura. She's under stress. She didn't really mean to hurt Owen. Why didn't you open the door?" He was silent for several seconds. His breath turned to steam. "I didn't think 2 minutes was dangerous." I closed Owen's door and walked around toward the driver's seat. Then I stopped with one hand on the roof of the car. "How long have you known the door code was changed?" Daniel did not answer. He stood there in the snow, looking over my shoulder at the brightly lit windows, and did not answer. The next morning I did not call Megan. I opened the door lock app and found 31 guest codes. That night, Owen slept in my room. He lay on Daniel's side of the bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Is the front door locked, Mom?" "Yes." 10 minutes later, he asked again. Then he turned toward me in the dark. "Can Aunt Megan come lock my bedroom door?" I pulled the blanket up over his shoulder and took a few seconds to think, because I knew I could not promise what I did not control. "She does not have a key to this house, and I am not going anywhere." He fell asleep about an hour later. I did not. On the morning of the 25th, Daniel was still sleeping on the downstairs sofa. I made coffee, brought my computer to the kitchen table, and opened the door lock app. I had bought and installed that lock system 3 years earlier, after a winter when the pipes burst. The owner account was still in my name. My code was marked disabled. Megan was listed as an administrator. I opened the history, and the list dropped farther than I expected. 31 guest codes had been created in 6 months. I sat still and stared at that number longer than necessary, then did exactly what I did at work. I exported the entire history to a file. I sorted it by date. I read the labels: July family, weekend 12, anniversary, doc group. Not one code carried the name of anyone I knew. Each had its own validity window: active Friday afternoon, expired Sunday at noon. Some lasted 5 days, some only 1 night. At work, when I saw a series of numbers repeating in the same pattern, I knew I was looking at a process, not a string of accidents. The doorbell camera still stored footage under my separate account. I downloaded the archived clips month by month. A couple rolled suitcases across the porch on a Friday afternoon in June. A family of 4, 2 children wearing life jackets, in July. A group of 6 carried coolers and a speaker inside at the end of August. I opened my phone calendar and compared the dates. That June weekend, Megan texted Daniel that she was going to Milwaukee to meet with her attorney. In July, she said she was visiting a friend in Green Bay. In August, she said she needed to get away for a few days. All 3 times, the house was full of people. I took screenshots of every camera clip with the date and time and saved them in a new folder. I named the folder with the house address, exactly the way I named property loss files. Daniel woke up around 9. He stood behind me, watched the screen for a while, then pulled out a chair and sat down. 2 of her friends stayed over once, he said. I knew about that. What else? Maybe they gave her some money. She said it was to help with the electricity and groceries. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. I didn't think it was a business, Laura. I turned the screen toward him. 31 codes. For 2 friends? Daniel looked at the list. He did not answer. I picked up my phone and opened my photo library. I had hundreds of pictures of the house because I photographed everything. I selected one of the dock from September of the previous year, cropped it to the boards and the roofline, and ran it through an image search. The first result was nearly identical, taken from the same angle but brighter. I opened it. A listing appeared under the title, Lakefront Retreat. The main photo was my house at sunset, photographed from the lake. 3 bedrooms, private dock, wood-burning fireplace, perfect for family vacations. Host, Megan. I scrolled through the entire set of photos. In the 4th picture, the wool blanket my grandmother had knitted was draped diagonally across the back of the sofa and folded as decoration. In the 9th, Owen's wooden train set was arranged in a row on the shelf beside the fireplace, exactly where Grandma's picture used to stand. I placed the phone face down on the table and sat still. It was not only the house being used. My grandmother's belongings and my son's toys had become props. The listing had 18 reviews. The first had been posted 8 months earlier. I spent all of December 26th reconstructing 8 months. I worked at the dining table with 3 windows open side by side on my screen. Owen watched cartoons in the next room. About every half hour, he came out to check the front door lock, then went back in. I saved everything: screenshots of the listing, seasonal nightly rates, the availability calendar for the previous 8 months, all 18 reviews, and the dates they were written. Many reviews mentioned the stay dates. I matched them in a spreadsheet against the door code history and camera footage. By afternoon, the spreadsheet aligned: at least 18 guest stays, at least 54 nights spread across 8 months. I did not know the exact amount Megan had collected. Looking at the listed rates for summer weekends, I only knew it was not a few $100s. It was tens of thousands. One review said the host was thoughtful, left coffee, and recommended a place to rent kayaks. Another thanked her for the warm blanket in the Lakeview bedroom. I read that sentence 3 times and closed the window. Then I opened my bill folder. I paid the property taxes in 2 installments. I paid the homeowner's insurance annually. In May, the lakeside porch roof leaked, and I paid a contractor in Verona $1,800. Daniel paid the winter heating bill from our joint account. Megan paid for internet and household supplies. I went through the electric bills month by month and placed them beside the guest date spreadsheet. On weekends, Megan said she was away, usage spiked. In August, I paid $240 to repair the dock without asking questions after Megan texted that a board had come loose. In the listing photos, my grandmother's old armchair had been replaced with a new gray chair, and I could not remember anyone ever telling me about it. That night, I called Claire Holloway. We scheduled a meeting for the 27th. Claire's office was on the 2nd floor of a red brick building near downtown, and the room contained only one plant and many file folders. She sat down, opened her notebook, and asked 5 questions in a row. Whose name was on the deed? Was there a lease? Was there an email stating a time limit? Did Megan receive mail or documents at that address? Had I ever given verbal or written permission to sublet the house? I placed a copy of the deed, the 3-month email, the door code history file, screenshots of the listing, and the bills on her desk. Claire read the email first, then read it again. "You have better documentation than most of my clients," she said. "Now I am going to tell you what you must not do." She folded her hands on the desk. Megan had lived there long enough that she could not be removed simply by changing the locks. I could not shut off utilities, move her belongings outside, or block her access before completing the legal process. If I did any of those things, the person with the stronger position would become the person forced to explain herself. "I know you are angry," Claire said. "That anger is completely justified, but it cannot appear in any action you take from this point forward." She laid out the steps in order. Serve notice terminating occupancy. Demand that new bookings stop and the listing be removed. Issue no more door codes. Preserve the condition of the property and everything inside it. Only after possession was returned would we reconcile revenue and damages. "What about the money she collected?" I asked. "We will get there, but not this week. This week, what you need to get back is the house." I agreed to every step, and I wrote them in my notebook in exactly the order she gave them. I thought of Owen on the porch, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do to Megan. But if I did it, what my son would learn was that the angrier person wins. I did not want to teach him that. I signed the papers Claire needed to begin the process and put the pen back in my bag. "How long?" I asked. "Faster than you fear, slower than you want," Claire said. "And you will have to tolerate several more weeks while she is still living in that house." Before I left, Claire asked one question. "Did your husband ever give his sister permission to use the house to make money?" That night, I waited until Owen was asleep before spreading the documents across the kitchen table. 4 stacks, side by side. The 3-month email on the far left. Then screenshots of the listing. Then the printed list of 31 door codes. Then the property tax, insurance, porch roof, and electric bills. Daniel came into the kitchen, looked at the table, and stopped at the end instead of sitting down. Sit down, I said. He sat. I did not accuse him. I only pushed the listing photos toward him and asked one question. How long have you known about the rentals? Daniel picked up the photos, flipped through 3, and set them down. Since last spring, a couple she knew stayed one weekend. She said they gave her a little money. How much? I didn't ask. And after that? He turned the empty cup on the table. She said the money was for groceries, internet, and small repairs. It sounded reasonable. Did you go up there on any of the other weekends? Yes, a few times. And what did you see? Daniel was silent longer than I expected. Outside, the furnace clicked and shut off. There were trash cans full of bottles, sheets hanging on the clothesline. Once I saw an unfamiliar car backing out of the driveway. He looked down. She said some friends had just left. Did you ask anything else? No. I looked at him. My husband counted inventory in a warehouse every day. He knew what a wrong number looked like. He had simply chosen not to count in this one place. I pushed the door code list in front of him. 31 codes, Daniel. 18 guest stays. 54 nights. Over 8 months. Inside a house in my name. He did not pick up the paper. He looked at it the way he might look at an inventory checklist he knew he had approved without reading. I didn't know it was that much, he said. You didn't know, because you didn't want to know. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already hated that she had stayed past the deadline, he said. I knew if you found out about this too, you would make her leave immediately. She had just gotten divorced. She needed some source of income. I thought it would all settle down in a few months. What did she say to you? Daniel hesitated. She said you would never notice because the house sat empty anyway. I let that sentence sit between us for a few seconds. It was the only thing he said all evening that made me put my hand on the table to steady myself. Not because Megan thought that way, because Daniel had heard it and found it reasonable enough not to tell me. Why is your way of helping your sister always to use something that belongs to me without asking me? I didn't think of it that way. Then how did you think of it? The house is in my name. I pay the taxes. I pay the insurance. I paid for the porch roof. Your sister changed the lot code until I could not get into my own house, and you knew before I did. He did not answer. Then she locked our son outside in the snow, and you stood 3 steps from the door. Daniel raised a hand to his face. I should have opened it, he said. Why didn't you? This time, he answered faster, and I knew it was the answer he had been telling himself since the 24th. Because if I opened it, she would have exploded right there. Then Mom would call. Then the entire family would have to choose sides. I just wanted to get through dinner. You already chose a side, Daniel. You chose it when you did not open the door. I pulled the 4 stacks of documents closer to me. You did not ask about the guests because you were afraid of her. You did not tell me the code had changed because you were afraid of her. You did not open the door for Owen because you were afraid of her. Those are not 3 different mistakes. They are one pattern. Daniel sat still for a long time. Then he asked what I planned to do. Megan will have to leave that house. The rentals have to stop. My attorney is handling the process. What about us? I haven't decided. I am not saying that to threaten you. I am saying it because today I honestly do not know. He nodded slowly, as if that was the answer he had expected. He did not argue or make promises. He only stood up, poured water, sat down again, and did not drink it. Let me talk to her first, he said. Do not send the papers yet. Give me a few days to call her. No. Laura. You had 18 months to talk to her. The notice was served 2 days later. Megan called me before the process server had even left the driveway. My phone rang at 11:20 a.m. on the 29th. I was at my desk, rereading the notice Claire had sent. It was short and clear. Megan had to move out by the deadline set by the attorney. Stop accepting bookings, remove the listing. Issue no more door codes to anyone. Do not move, sell, or dispose of anything in the house. There was not one line about changing the locks. Claire had warned me, and I followed her instructions exactly. I answered the call. You're throwing me onto the street in the middle of winter? Megan shouted. I could hear paper rustling on her end. A newly divorced woman in the middle of January in Wisconsin. You were given 3 months. You stayed 18. Because my brother told me I could stay. You rented my house to strangers for 8 months, Megan. You changed the door code. You locked my son outside in the snow. 2 minutes, she said. He was outside for exactly 2 minutes, and you are turning that into an entire lawsuit. I sat down in my chair. Before the call, I had told myself I would not argue about the length of time because that was exactly where she wanted to pull me. Locking a child outside does not become acceptable because it lasted only 2 minutes. Megan changed direction. She always changed direction quickly. You have always looked down on me. Ever since I got married, you have looked at me that way. You have a house, a job, a husband, a child. Do you have any idea what divorce is like? You know Daniel does not own that house, right? Daniel promised me I could stay as long as I wanted. Daniel does not own that house, I said. So he had nothing to promise you. Megan hung up. I sat and watched the phone screen go dark. My hands were steady, my breathing was steady, but I remained motionless for 4 minutes before reopening the file. That afternoon, the family started calling. No one called me. They called Daniel. I sat in the living room and listened to him talk in the kitchen, his voice dropping lower with every call. His mother called twice, an uncle in Eau Claire called once, a cousin texted. The story they heard was very neat. Laura was cold. Laura owned 2 houses and was still throwing her sister-in-law onto the street. The rentals only covered expenses because leaving the house empty was wasteful, and the boy had only received a mild punishment for damaging something. By evening, Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding his phone. Mom asked if we could wait until spring. What did you tell her? He was silent. Then he placed the phone face down on the table. I said we would discuss it. There is nothing to discuss. Daniel, I am not asking you to fight with your family. I am asking you not to bring their pressure into this house and put it on my table. On the 31st, Megan drove down to Madison. I heard the car before the doorbell. Owen was in the living room with his train set. I told him to go upstairs, and this time he went immediately without asking why. I opened the door but blocked the doorway. Megan wore an unbuttoned coat, her hair tied back hastily, the notice in her hand like a weapon. Withdraw this, she said. No. Let me inside first. No. She blinked. I think that was the first time in 18 months I had said those 2 words to her in a row. That house is the only thing I have left, Megan said. Her voice cracked slightly, and I believed that part was real. Do you understand? The only thing. It was a place where you were helped. You turned that help into ownership. I kept that house alive, she said. You leave it closed 9 months a year. I am the one who lives there. You lived there for free. Then you took other people's money for living there. Megan stepped back off the porch. Then take me to court, she said. I will stay in that house until someone in a uniform comes and drags me out. Let's see how you explain that to your son. She turned, walked 3 steps, and stopped in the middle of the driveway. 3 days later, the listing was still online and a new family had just booked a weekend in the middle of January. I took a screenshot of the new booking at 7 in the morning, before Owen woke up. A family of 4. Check-in Friday afternoon, January 16th, 2 nights. Beneath it was a line saying the host usually responded within an hour. I sent the image to Claire at 7:09. By noon, she had sent a formal demand. Cancel the booking, refund the guests, and remove the entire listing within 48 hours. Megan did not respond to Claire. She called Daniel 4 times that afternoon. He answered the second call while standing on the back porch, and through the glass door I heard exactly one sentence. I cannot withdraw it, Megan. It is not my house. That night, his mother arranged a family video call. 6 people, a screen divided into squares, and I sat beside Daniel at the kitchen table with the computer between us. She spoke first. Megan is in crisis. Laura owns 2 houses. Family is supposed to share in times like this, and nothing happened to the boy. He is perfectly healthy. Megan sat in the square on the right and said nothing, letting their mother speak for her. I opened my spreadsheet on the computer, then closed it again. I did not need it here. No one on the call had asked me a single question about the numbers. I did not interrupt anyone. I did not look at Daniel, put my hand over his, or write anything on paper and slide it toward him. I wanted to know what he would choose when no one reminded him that he had to choose. Daniel, his mother said. Say something. He did not speak immediately. 4 seconds, then 5. I could hear the furnace running inside the wall. Then Megan spoke. "You told me that house was where I could start over. You said those exact words in your kitchen last June." "I did," Daniel replied. Then, "But I had no right to say it." The entire screen went silent. "That house is not mine," he said. "It never was. My name is not on it. I do not pay the property taxes. I do not pay the insurance. I promised you something I did not own, and I let you believe that promise for 1.5 years. "Daniel," his mother said, "I knew about the rentals, Mom. I did not know all of it, but I knew guests were paying her, and I chose not to ask more questions. I was wrong not to tell Laura." Megan gave a short laugh through the microphone. "And on the night of the 24th, Daniel continued, "you had no right to lock my son outside. There is no reason that makes that acceptable. Laura has turned you against your own sister," his mother said. "Laura did not make me do anything." His voice remained steady, and that was what kept me still. I was the one standing 3 steps from the door who did not open it. No one made me stand there. His mother said something else about family being all people had in the end, then turned off her camera. One by one, the squares on the screen went dark. The call ended without anyone saying goodbye. Daniel closed the laptop. He looked at me as if he were waiting for something. "That is the first time you have said any of that in front of them," I said. "I know. It does not erase 18 months of silence. One correct statement on one night does not give us back Christmas Eve. I know, but it is the first time you open the door yourself instead of standing there waiting for me to do it." I said nothing else and promised him nothing that night. The next week, Daniel began individual counseling every Tuesday at 5. I agreed to marriage counseling, but I told the therapist in the first session that I was there to understand, not to commit to an outcome. Owen began seeing a child counselor on Thursday afternoons. At home, he checked the front door 3 times before bed. He carried a plastic key from a toy set in his pocket and sometimes touched it when someone rang the doorbell. One evening, he asked whether anyone other than his parents could lock the doors in our home. I said no. It was the only promise I dared make with certainty. By the final week before the move-out deadline, Megan had not packed a single box. The listing disappeared on a Wednesday morning. I opened the old link and found a blank page with a message saying the content was no longer available. 3 January bookings had been canceled and the guests refunded. Through the legal exchange and the transaction records that were produced, Claire determined the amount. Claire called me that afternoon. "We have the number," she said. "Over 8 months, that account received more than $21,000. The net amount was lower after platform fees and refunds." I wrote the figure in my notebook and looked at it for a while. $21,000. During the same period, I paid the property taxes, the insurance, $1,800 for the porch roof, and $240 to repair the dock after a party I had not been invited to and had not even known about. Knowing the number did not make me feel relieved. It only closed a question I had carried for 3 weeks. Megan did not dispute the figure. Through her attorney, she said most of the money had been spent on living expenses, new items for the house, and her divorce attorney's fees. "Do you want to chase every dollar now, or do you want the house back first?" Claire asked. "The house first. That is the right order." We focused on 4 things: the handover date, the keys, administrative control of the door codes, and the condition of the property inside. The money would remain for later and be handled in a separate agreement. Claire continued each step in the planned sequence, not a day early and not a day late. Every document that went out was copied to me. I saved them all in the same folder as the camera images and the guest date spreadsheet. By the second week of January, Megan understood I was not bluffing. She asked for another 3 months. I refused, and I answered through Claire instead of by phone because I knew I would soften if I heard Megan's voice. The original 3 months had become 18. Every extension had created the next one, and I no longer trusted any deadline Megan set for herself. Daniel did not step in to negotiate for his sister. I noticed that. He did something else. He sent Megan a list of 6 apartments for rent in Sun Prairie and DeForest, called 2 of them for her, and said he would pay for the moving truck and the first month's deposit. He did not suggest using my house for even 1 more day. Megan treated that as betrayal. She told him he had chosen his wife over his sister, and I heard it because Daniel had the call on speaker in the car. In the end, to avoid extending the dispute, Megan agreed. She would move out before the final deadline, turn over the house and every key, accept no more guests. The money she had collected would be resolved in a separate agreement. Moving day was a Saturday in the middle of January, 4 degrees below zero. I went up with Claire and stood outside in the yard while Megan carried boxes to the rental truck. She said nothing for nearly 2 hours. She stacked her belongings in neat layers, like someone who had moved more times than she wanted to. Twice, she passed me in the entryway. Both times, she looked straight ahead. The white tablecloth lay folded on the dining table. The cocoa stain was still there, faded to a yellow-brown. She left it behind. She did not ask where Owen was. She did not say his name once that entire morning, and she did not apologize. Before getting into the truck, Megan stopped at the end of the walkway and turned back. "You destroyed this family," she said. I stood on my grandmother's front steps with both hands in my coat pockets. "I only ended your use of family as a permission slip." The truck backed down the driveway, turned left, and the sound of its engine disappeared behind the pines. After Megan was gone, I opened the storage room door and found all of my grandmother's things piled behind boxes of guest linens. We walked through the house for 2 hours, room by room, with a neutral inventory specialist recording everything behind us. There was no major damage. The hallway floor had 3 long scratches. One dining chair had a broken back spindle and had been propped upside down against the storage room wall. The bathroom faucet dripped slowly. The rest were things that did not belong in an inventory report. Family photographs had been removed from the walls and stacked in an unlabeled cardboard box. My grandmother's wool blanket was sealed in a vacuum bag beneath 4 boxes of white guest sheets. The wooden train set, the one shown in the 9th photo of the listing, sat in its original box with all 8 cars. I did not redecorate the whole house that day. I did 3 things. I put my grandmother's photograph back on the mantel, exactly over the dark rectangular patch of wood. I took the wool blanket out of the bag and draped it over the sofa. I placed the train set beneath the Christmas tree no one had taken down. After possession was legally returned, a locksmith replaced the entire lock system. Every guest code was deleted. 31 lines disappeared from the screen in 3 seconds. Only one administrator account remained, and it was mine. Daniel had his own code, but he did not have permission to create new codes for anyone. He did not ask why. I think he understood. That weekend, I took Owen up to the lake. In my coat pocket was a new key made just for him, attached to a blue plastic key ring. We parked. Owen opened his car door, walked 5 steps along the gravel path, then stopped in front of the porch. He did not step up. "Does Aunt Megan still have a code, Mom?" "No, every lock has been replaced. She has no way to get inside anymore." "Will strangers come again?" "No. This house is not being rented. No one is paying to sleep here." He looked at the door. Snow rested in a thin line along the railing, exactly like Christmas Eve. "Will I get locked outside again?" I sat down on the steps so my eyes were level with his. I did not promise that nothing bad would ever happen again. He would discover that promise was false, and then he would stop believing my other promises. "I will tell you 3 things. Megan no longer has access to this house. This house is no longer being rented, and you do not need anyone's permission to be safe inside your family's home." I took out the key and placed it in his palm. Owen held it with both hands. He climbed the steps, put the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. He stepped into the hallway, stood there, then looked back at me. "Can I close the door now?" "Of course." Owen closed the door from the inside. No one was locked outside. Only the wind and snow remained behind the door. That night, we ate a simple dinner. Mac and cheese, toast, and cocoa poured into my grandmother's old ceramic mugs, including the one with the chipped handle. Owen spilled a little cocoa on the table. He froze immediately, his shoulders rose, his hands pulled inward, and he looked at me. I handed him a dish towel. "It is only a spill, honey." Daniel pulled his chair closer and wiped the part of the table on his side with Owen. No one shouted. No one was put outside. I did not take the house away from Megan. Megan never owned it. I only stopped allowing my silence to turn kindness into a permanent entitlement. Daniel and I still live together. We still go to counseling. I have not told anyone that everything is fine because I do not know that yet. He will have to prove change through many different choices over many years, not through one family phone call. That night, Owen placed the blue key on the table beside his bed. For the first time since Christmas, he did not check the door again. The house was still the same house, the walls were not what had changed. I had finally decided who was allowed to make rules inside them. I hope my story helps you understand one thing. Helping relatives does not mean allowing them to cross every boundary, and keeping the peace stops being the right thing when your own child is the one getting hurt. I chose to take back the house, end the rentals, and make Daniel take responsibility for his silence. What would you have done in my situation? If you would have handled it differently, leave a comment and tell me. I truly want to hear what you think.